everyone. My name is Claire Patton, and welcome to this episode of Discovering Digital Humanities with the Oklahoma State University Library. Today, I'm talking to my boss, Mary Larson. How are you, Mary?
So far, so good, Claire. Thanks. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well.
Good.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your presentation?
Okay. I thought today, one of the things that got me interested in digital humanities was using special collections for digital humanities. And I think in some respects, what you find in special collections are data sets that fly under the radar because people don't always become aware that they're there. So as digital humanities and new data visualization techniques became a little more popular with researchers, they started seeking out these well-known package databases, things like Project Gutenberg. And while some of these are free, some of them have a really hefty price tag for libraries and the institutions using them. So what I wanted to do was shine a spotlight on the fact that there are a lot of freely available resources out there and data sets, largely through the efforts of all of these special collections departments all over the world. And they can be used for everything from data visualization, looking for patterns in textual materials, network analysis, mapping, a whole range of things. So yeah, that is what I wanted to talk about today.
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought I could talk about a few sample data sets that are available through the OSU Library Special Collections and discuss how they can be used for humanities and social science research. And the hope is that these examples will lead people to look at similar materials in other places too, so that everyone has a better idea of the potential of some of these materials. But before I go into specific examples, I'd really like to do a quick overview of just what is included in special collections, at least as far as the data sets are concerned. And I think the first one might be the most obvious, government documents. They have a wide range of databases for federal and state resources, touching on everything from politics to environment, patents and trademarks, the whole 9 yards. But I think people are used to looking at data sets from the feds. They're used to going to government documents. So that's one of the lower hanging fruits as things go. In the maps and spatial data area of the library, we have some amazing maps and aerial photos from over a century of Oklahoma history. And they can provide information on everything from ground cover and drought to railroad development, community evolution, land ownership, things like that. And we're really lucky that we have large amounts of metadata. And for the uninitiated, that would be descriptive keywords for all of these maps so that you can parse them out by area, by time, or any other filters you want to use to trace trends. So that's really great in that regard. I think one of the hidden gems for data sets in the OSU library is the archives. As more and more materials have gotten digitized over the past couple of decades, this has become a real treasure trove. And one set of the records that's just been released within the last couple of weeks is a transcribed digital version of historian Angie DeBoe's diaries, beginning in 1898 when she was 8 years old.
Wow.
And then going currently through the late 1960s. We'll ultimately have all of her diaries online through the late 80s, but the last few years are in editing at the moment. But for those researchers who are looking to do any sort of network analysis on Dr. DeBoe's ties in terms of friends, colleagues, political contacts, this is going to be an invaluable resource. And I think these diaries are also going to be great for textual analysis of trends and topics in her scholarship.
Yeah.
And I want to talk now too about a similar use of oral history materials to what I was just talking about with the DeBoe materials. as you know, I originally come from the world of oral history. And here at OSU, we have the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program, which I used to be attached to, and which is now run by Sarah Milligan. And the OOHRP website has at least a dozen collections with a total of more than 1,000 interviews available. And based on the average length of a transcript, I mean, that comes out to well over 50,000 pages of transcripts available, which is a considerable chunk of material for a data set. And while the facts of the content are obviously prime research territory for anyone, I think something different happens when people start to analyze large groupings of text like that. And I think you can find all sorts of patterns and trends. And I think people might naturally think that it would be historians who would be most interested in data mining of that sort. But I can tell you that based on the content of these interviews, there are possible uses for geographers, for anthropologists like me, gerontologists, ag economists, climate scientists. I mean, there's something for everybody. And I've used them for my own research on rural women. And just to give you a quick example of what you might be able to do with 50,000 pages of oral history transcripts, I was looking at how rural women in Oklahoma used their own labor to support their family farms through different eras, starting with the Dust Bowl. And I was really interested in their mindsets and experiences. So I pulled a subset of all of these transcripts so that we were just representing rural women. And took a look, ran a textual analysis on the materials to see what patterns might turn up. And, you know, I was pretty conversant with a lot of these interviews already because I'd done some of them. I'd edited a lot of them. And I knew what trends I saw, but I also know that we tend to overlook things the most with material we're most familiar with. So I wanted to see what might be in there that I was completely overlooking.
Yeah.
So I ran the text of the interviews through AntConc, which is an open source text analysis kit. You've learned, I think you've become conversant with AntConc too. For anyone who wants to do something like this in Python, you can easily do it that way if you're so inclined, or there are a lot of other different programs out there. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into the whole process, but suffice it to say, I did a lot of format stripping, batch loaded everything into AntConc, and compared the files against another comparable corpus to get the program to spit out a list of words showing what terms were used most frequently and which terms were most unusual. And I think that's, you can always find out what words are used most frequently, but what I really wanted to see was how my word and phrase frequencies compared to another list. So I wanted to see what was unusual in my set of interviews. And this is an example here of a keyword list that was generated from the oral histories. It shows both overall frequency, but also you see the word up there that says keyness. And that basically is telling you how unusual a particular word was relative to, say, 1,000 pages from, the interviews versus 1,000 pages from a similar corpus. And this sort of comparison is what I was trying to do here. And in this list, I've scrolled down just a little bit to get to things that might be a little more unusual. So I've gotten past the pronouns and articles and that sort of thing. And you can see words like house, mother, home, laughter, dad, county. And if you want to see these in a more easily visualizable form, here's a nice word cloud conveniently in the shape of a house. And I know this is something that you've learned too, Claire, over the last couple of years as you've worked with these different tools. As with most digital humanities analyses, the results that AntConc or a word cloud generator or whatever tool spits out aren't the actual answers that are going to be, the end of your research. The numbers in and of themselves don't mean all that much, but they alert you to trends and clue you into anomalies in your data that you might want to inspect further. So in the interest of time, I'm going to stop there, but I just want people to keep in mind that there's a lot of potential in special collections, in those 50,000 pages of interviews or thousands of maps or government documents or archival documents and photos that you don't want to overlook. And even just at the OSU Library, I'm sure that there's something of interest in those data sets for just about anybody who's going to watch this. So for people who are interested in taking a closer look at some of those collections, this is a contact list for the people who manage those collections.
Thank you so much for telling us about that. My first question is, how do you define digital humanities?
I like to think it's tough because so many people try to define digital humanities by what it's not.
Yeah.
It's sort of like I think it was the old definition of obscenity. I'll know it when I see it, but with digital humanities, I think it's really using technological tools to do analyses that wouldn't have been previously possible or wouldn't have been possible in the same way in the service of humanities questions.
Yeah.
So you can be using these technologies all day long, but if you're not doing it in the service of larger questions tied to the humanities, then it may be digital, but it's not digital humanities.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That would be my definition, I guess.
Yeah. So how did you learn these skills that you use every day, it looks like?
I actually learned them on my own. When I first started, I learned things on my own. I just went online, saw tutorials, but then I went to 2 digital humanities summer institutes at the University of Victoria. If you ever get a chance to do that, it's absolutely fantastic. It's like nerd camp. It's a week-long thing in the summer. It's very intensive, but you get into these classes with people who are just as passionate about these issues, and you have everyone from people at the very beginning of this who aren't that comfortable with technology to folks who are doing their own coding. And it's a really wide range of people, but it's a really fantastic opportunity to find out about other things that are going on, because besides the classes they have, you're in classes most of the day, but they have breakout sessions that everybody comes to.
Yeah.
So you might have 300 people in this auditorium, and people are sharing the research they're doing at their universities.
Yeah.
So you kind of get, as well as the very specific things that you learn about the topic you've gone there for, you're really getting a broad introduction to a lot of other digital humanities projects that you might not know about. So I started on my own. I went to DHSI for 2 years, and then I learned more on my own after that. But also, doing things like that camps. There used to be digital humanities that camps in Oklahoma. There are lectures, there's a digital humanities group on campus at OSU that I know you're aware of. And that's been great too. People get to share all of their research, and we have workshops, and the library also has related workshops too. So
and pretty much every interview that I've done for this project, collaboration has been a really big theme.
Yeah, it has. And that's actually one of the key premises or the key tenets of digital humanities, is that it's very collaborative. It almost requires it. It's so many humanities scholars are used to working by themselves in a room, and digital humanities kind of turns that on its head, because there's so much collaboration that it's really hard to do in a bubble.
What is the value of digital humanities when compared to traditional historical methods? or historian methods?
Mm-hmm. I think it's just another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
In the past, we've had ways of uncovering, we use different methodologies to uncover themes and topics. And really it's another methodological tool. And in some respects, it helps us parse things in a different way. It gets back to what I mentioned before about seeing what you expect to see versus seeing what you don't expect to see.
Yeah.
And I think in some respects, digital humanities is very good at helping us see the things that we're missing.
Yeah.
That we might not have noticed otherwise.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Plus it allows us to, when you're using computational methods, it allows you to look at vast amounts of information that it really wouldn't have been feasible to analyze in the same way in previous decades. At the same time, there's also the caveat that there are ethical issues that you have to be very aware of too when you're doing this. But that's part of humanities research too, is paying attention to that side of the house.
Yeah.
So.
Well, do you have anything else that you would like to talk about before we end our time today?
Not that I can think of. I think digital humanities has been really interesting as a way of opening up different ways of looking at materials. And I think it's been really key as we've tried to form a digital humanities community of practice at OSU to have all of this collaboration between the library and the College of Arts and Sciences and all the individual students and grad students and faculty members and staff people. And I think that's been the most exciting thing, is kind of seeing all of this grow maybe in the last 10 years or so, and having great digital humanities interns like so the people who are really interested, I think that makes a difference, and it makes us feel a little less nerdy.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, good, I'm not the only one who finds this fascinating.
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah.
But it also gives us a way of bouncing ideas off each other and sharing tools. And I think that's been great. So
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you, Claire. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Take care.